I think a lot of people do carry around shame that shapes the way that they live their life. The first step is to acknowledge it. Maybe it can improve someone's life, get to know themselves better. Hey everyone, welcome back to your regularly scheduled self-reflection. I'm Tash and this is Things We Say in Therapy, a place to feel seen and heard and to learn new things. We usually talk about the less spoken about sides of mental health, things that I don't hear about much that I think are important to talk about. If this information speaks to your experience, that's amazing. I'm so happy you're here. If not, I hope it's valuable for your growth in the future. Everyone's story is different and that's perfectly fine. Today, we're diving into something that could be quietly shaping your thoughts, feelings, actions, beliefs in your everyday life. Something that you might not even realize is there. So today we're going to be talking about unconscious shame. We'll talk about what it is, how it shows up in your everyday life, and things that you can do about it, as well as some tips and questions to reflect on to maybe acknowledge whether you have unconscious shame or not. We all carry some form of shame somewhere in our life, but this episode isn't about blaming yourself for feeling that shame. It's about understanding why we feel it and what's going on beneath the surface. So stay until the end for some questions that might help you realize whether you're holding unconscious shame that you're carrying around without realizing. So what is unconscious shame and why am I talking about it? Shame is very deep rooted. It's something that makes you believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with who you are. It goes beneath the surface, beyond your actions, and tells you that there is something wrong with you at your core, something to hide, something to be ashamed of. And so obviously unconscious shame is having that belief but not realizing that you have that. It's not at the forefront of your mind that you're trying to hide something about yourself from the outside world. It's so deep rooted that it shapes how you're acting, but you think that's just how you act and you don't know that it's you just trying to hide a part of yourself. It's often internalized in childhood and just stays buried. And obviously we can only see things from our own perspectives. So if it's unconscious shame, you may just be thinking that that's how you act, that's who you are, that's how you are, and not realizing that there's something that needs to be acknowledged, not fixed. That's very important. Not fixed because there's nothing wrong with you, but acknowledging it and reshaping your beliefs and therefore reshaping how you live your life can result in you being a lot happier, a lot more fulfilled. I think this is important to talk about because I think a lot of people do carry around shame that shapes the way that they live their life. I know that I definitely did and maybe still do, but the first step is to acknowledge it. And so if we talk about it and figure out how to get beneath the surface and how to self-reflect on these things, maybe it can improve someone's life, help people get to know themselves better. So by talking about this, I'm aiming to identify the unconscious shame that you might have, how to tackle it, and how to improve your quality of life and your confidence. So let me further clarify what shame is. Shame can feel similar in your body to guilt, but the difference between shame and guilt is that guilt is you thinking, I did something bad, and it focuses on your behavior, whereas shame is you thinking, I am bad, and it focuses on your character and who you are. There's also a difference between internal and external shame. That is your internal beliefs and perceived judgment from others. You feeling shame about things that people have told you are true. External shaming, like bullying, can lead to internal shame and beliefs that the things that those people said are true. But I'm here to show you that they're not and that things can be different. So here's some signs that you could be carrying unconscious shame. The first one is a fear of vulnerability or being seen for who you actually are. This can lead to a performance trying to uphold a character externally that doesn't reflect who you are on the inside, or it doesn't reflect who you truly are. You could think that you're that person, but you're not. It's someone that you've curated to present to the world. You've done so well that you've now convinced yourself that you are that person when you're not. It can also lead to perfectionism tendencies, a lack of authenticity and therefore loneliness and a lack of connection with other people. In a similar sense, you could also be experiencing a fear of being seen physically if you have shame based around how you look. I used to have this, and it caused me to miss out on so many opportunities. Although I am a truster in the universe that if I was supposed to have experienced those things or gotten those things, then I would have. But, you know, I feel like I missed out on so much time where I could be developing my confidence because I was just afraid of people seeing me and judging me. I had a lot of shame based around how I look. Even just doing these video podcasts at first was quite difficult for me because I wasn't used to watching myself so often. But it's actually, fun fact, it's actually increased my confidence and helped me realize little quirks that I have that I actually like about myself. But yeah, I used to dull down my personality and be small when I actually have quite a big personality, because if I was the loudest one in the room, I knew people would be looking at me. I cared so much about what other people would think or say about me or say to me that would hurt my feelings. And so I would rather just stay small and not be seen. Another one is self-sabotage. I think this is quite common when you get into your late teens and early 20s, because that's, you know, when you're becoming an adult and everything starts happening. And if you believe that you don't deserve something, then you can really self-sabotage some great opportunities for yourself. But self-sabotage is an avoidance technique. You're avoiding rejection. So you're sabotaging yourself first as a form of control, because if you ruin it, then someone else can't ruin it for you. Self-sabotage is a whole other can of worms that I feel like I can do an entire episode on. So I'll move on. But you could be self-sabotaging without realizing it. Another one is harsh self-talk. If you don't live up to this character that you've created, or you accidentally show a part of yourself that you're trying not to show to the outside world, then that can lead to punishing yourself and shaming that side of yourself that you think is so embarrassing that you don't want to show anybody. I mentioned harsh self-talk in like every episode, but I'm going to keep talking about it because it's so normalized to talk badly of yourself and put yourself down, especially to get external validation. And it's just so detrimental to your mental health. Relying on people to tell you how great you are is so much more unstable than telling yourself. Very important topic. Unconscious shame can also lead to a lack of creativity because you're not showing your true self. Those creative sides of you don't really get a chance to come out because you're shoving them down. It's much more difficult to tap into that creative side. I'm a strong believer that humans are supposed to be creative. We're supposed to think outside the box in order to thrive. Another way it can show up, classic people pleasing, to get the validation that you don't give to yourself. You crave that external validation that you get from pleasing people, because once you get that, it's confirmation that this character that you've curated is believable and that people think you are that way. It's confirmation that your fake persona is working. Unconscious shame can also lead to overcompensation. So being a workaholic, being a perfectionist, this can lead to other things like addiction. And finally, isolation. This could be because you fear being seen, or because you're so exhausted from constantly performing this fake persona of yourself that you need extra time to recoup and rest, because it can be exhausting. Another term for this is masking, but that's usually used for neurodivergent people. But I suppose it could be used in this context as well. Where does unconscious shame come from? It could be from childhood experiences, like I mentioned earlier. Like most adult behaviours and attributes, it's born from childhood. Things like neglect, excessive criticism, emotional abuse. It could also be born from cultural norms, things like gender roles, body image, productivity, and career expectations. I know that a lot of cultures have very high expectations for their children, but that can be very difficult because on both sides of the coin, right? If you do follow that path and it's not actually something that you want to be doing, then it's a lot harder. And so you create this fake persona and you have shame about who you actually are underneath. But if you don't follow those rules, then you probably hear about it a lot. and that can cause shame too. So I feel like you just can't really win if you aren't the type of person to follow those expectations, which is perfectly fine. And I don't think that anyone else's wishes should be pushed on their children. I think that's a form of abuse, personally. It can be born from religious belief systems where self-worth is equated to being pure or having a certain level of success. And finally, trauma. I won't go too much into trauma because there's just so many different things that could lead to having unconscious shame. But a couple of examples could be bullying. This is the one that I experienced, which can lead to complex PTSD, and trigger warning, child sexual abuse, which can lead to over-sexualization of yourself as an adult because you feel so much shame about yourself that you overcompensate by flaunting your sexuality, which isn't an issue in and of itself, but if it's born from having unconscious shame, then that's probably not who you truly are. And so it should be addressed. What I'm getting at here is that shame hides in plain sight. It's possible to acknowledge it when it's unconscious. It can present itself as a few examples: humility, saying things like, I don't need praise or I don't need recognition. It can be stoicism, where you say, oh, I don't need help with anything. Lack of emotions, being hyper individualistic. Another one is being over disciplined, making sure everything's perfect in order to avoid the shame that you think you're going to feel if you get criticized or rejected. So it's usually masked by anger, withdrawal, and this is a common one I've seen, being very overly judgmental of other people because you're so nitpicky about yourself. It causes you to project onto others. So on to the good bit. So how do we cope with shame? The first step to anything mental health related is to acknowledge that it's there. There is a lot of power in acknowledging it and naming it as shame. The shitty thing about shame is that because we're so ashamed of being ashamed, you just push it down, and it can be quite scary to actually name it as being there. For me, therapy helped me realize where my internal shame lied. You get what I'm saying? For me, what helped was values and core beliefs work. So we went through a list of general core beliefs that people have about themselves that are negative, that cause shame and negative self-talk. And mine was that I'm not important enough. And my shame grew from not being acknowledged enough. I then believed that my thoughts and my opinions were not valued or taken into consideration in making decisions about me, or were not taken into consideration at all, really. So that drove me to believe that they don't matter, and that those thoughts and feelings should be shoved down, and I should replace them with something else, something that appeases other people, something that is more palatable for others. So I hope that sort of gives an example of what I'm getting at. I'm going to give you quite a long list of examples of internal monologues that could reflect unconscious shame that you have. I'm not saying that these are the only ones, but I feel like this just gives a good rounded gist of the sort of things that you can look out for in your own head. So the first category is self-worth and identity. This could be things like, I'm not good enough no matter what I do. Who do I think I am trying to do this? They're going to find out I'm a fraud. That touches on imposter syndrome, which I think is largely associated with shame about your abilities. And I'm too much or I'm not enough. The next category is perfectionism and achievement. This could be things like, if I make mistakes, I've failed. Mistakes mean I'm incompetent. I have to keep proving my worth. I'm a burden. I shouldn't need anybody. And that one touches on the stoicism that I was talking about before. And if I show weakness, they'll lose respect for me or think less of me. The next one is shame around body and appearance. I'm disgusting. No one could love me looking like this. I need to fix myself, or my body is the problem. The fourth category is emotion and expression. This could be things like, I'm too emotional, I'm too sensitive, I shouldn't feel like this, crying is for the weak, I have to stay in control of everything or everything will fall apart. The fifth category is social anxiety and comparison. Everyone is doing better than me. I never say the right thing. I'm so embarrassing. I don't fit in anywhere. Finally, other common examples of shaming yourself could be things like, that was so stupid, you always mess up, and they're just being nice, they don't actually like you. So recognizing where your shame lies in your everyday life, is that body and appearance, is that social interaction and social anxiety, is that through emotions and expression, it's really going to be helpful if you acknowledge which parts of you find shameful. And it takes time. Don't rush into this thinking that you have to sort this as a quick fix. It's a skill that you have to teach yourself, especially if, you know, you've been treating yourself like this for so long. It took me until I was 23, I think, to start really acknowledging this stuff, but it is worth it to begin. So don't be judgmental with yourself, just be patient. So the next step, I would say, after acknowledging where the shame lies and noticing those day-to-day things that you pick on yourself for or try and hide, this could be being vulnerable about your shame. Because we find shame so shameful, we obviously automatically try and hide it. But once you've talked about it, once it's out there, it loses that power it has over you. If you just embrace it and make peace with your story, make peace with those parts of yourself that you aren't necessarily proud of just yet. Obviously, therapy is a big one. Lots of trauma-based therapies, core values therapy, CBT, EMDR. I personally like psychotherapy. I like talking and sort of unpacking things that way and helping to reshape my internal narrative. It definitely helps me to rationalize things, I guess. Obviously, I have to bring self-compassion into it, treating yourself like someone you love. If someone you love came to you saying, you know, I've never spoken to anyone about this before because I'm really embarrassed, but I feel really ashamed about this and I've been bullying myself with it and I just don't know what to do, what would you tell them? You wouldn't tell them, wow, that's so embarrassing. Like, why are you telling me that? Would you? So try and treat yourself like somebody you love. You could also use affirmations to challenge that shame voice that you have in your head. So these affirmations could be things like, you're human, you're still worthy, being imperfect doesn't make me unworthy, I don't have to earn my worth, I already have it just by existing, mistakes don't define me, one moment doesn't erase who I am, and I can learn from these experiences without attacking myself. That last one is the most important. But just as a reminder here, for your self-reflection, there is a difference between self-compassion and self-indulgence. So I know I go on and on about self-compassion, but beware that you can rationalize yourself into thinking that being self-compassionate is healthy when in fact you're avoiding accountability or responsibility, or even just discomfort. You could be avoiding the discomfort of holding yourself accountable for mistakes. If you make mistakes that hurt other people, you don't need to shame yourself for that. You don't need to attack yourself for that. But there does need to be some sort of self-reflection and potentially changed behavior. You can still use neutral statements like, I'm aware that this was hurtful to others and I'll try my best not to do this again. But avoiding discomfort through self-compassion can look like, oh, whatever, I don't care, I don't need this. Refusing a conversation with somebody. But that can actually be quite harmful to yourself and to others. So just be wary of that difference there. But you can use mindfulness and emotional regulation techniques to help combat that self-indulgence. But this does take work and it's hard, but sit with uncomfortable emotions. Shame does pass, and any uncomfortable emotion does pass if you don't fight it or feed it. So if you acknowledge it and name that it's there, what you're feeling, in this case shame, you rationalize it, you say, this is why I'm feeling this way, and then you just let it pass you by. If you're resisting it, if you're pushing it down, or you're getting annoyed that you're feeling a certain emotion, you're feeding into it, and it's just going to spiral you and you'll probably feel it again. But if you just acknowledge neutrally that it's there without letting it bother you, it actually helps a lot. I have this with rumination. I tend to ruminate about things when I have a bad experience, and my therapist told me, what would it look like if you just let it be there instead of getting really angry that you keep thinking about these things. And weirdly, when I was just like, oh, I'm having those thoughts again, instead of being like, fuck's sake, why do I keep thinking about this? It actually reduced the amount that I was thinking about it and the amount that I was ruminating. Just telling you, just letting you know. But yeah, so by not fighting it or feeding it, you're decreasing the power that it has over you. So finally, the part you've all been waiting for. I'm going to leave you with these questions that hopefully will help you realize any unconscious shame that you are carrying around with you. So, you can write these down or you can message me and I can send them to you in a PDF, but I'll just read them out quickly here. Number 1, do you feel uncomfortable when people praise you? Number 2, do you hide parts of yourself from the outside world? If so, why? Number 3, when you feel criticized or rejected, what are your immediate beliefs about yourself? Number 4, do you often apologize when you haven't done anything wrong? Number 5, do you usually go out of your way to avoid disappointing people? Number 6, are there memories that you usually avoid thinking about or talking about because they make you feel a certain way? Why do you think this is? And finally, do you shut down, lash out, or numb yourself when you start to feel vulnerable? Now, these aren't questions that you need to rush and solve. They are invitations to start self-reflecting on where or why you might feel shame. Pick one that stands out to you and sit with it without judging yourself and just see how it makes you feel. I'll leave you with a personal story about myself just to show you that vulnerability actually isn't that scary and it just makes you human. My personal feelings when I feel rejected or criticized is just to run away and hide and isolate, because my automatic thoughts are clearly, I'm not worthy. And if no one can see me, I can avoid feeling rejected or like I'm not good enough. Avoid that criticism that could confirm my negative beliefs about myself. This podcast actually really helps me with that, because when you put yourself out there and you open yourself up to public rejection and public criticism, it kind of just builds that assurance that people are gonna have opinions of you. But at the end of the day, my belief in myself and my belief in my abilities and my belief in this podcast is more important. And I put faith in trusting that the right people will find me, because being authentic and living this life that I want to and enjoy is much more important than living a life hiding from myself. Thank you so much for listening to episode 8. I hope you found something valuable from today, and I'm really grateful that you joined me. Remember that shame doesn't define you, and often the parts that you're hiding, the parts that you're suppressing, that you're shoving down, that you're not acknowledging, are usually the parts of yourself that make you the most human. Please find my pages on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube and give me a cheeky follow, subscribe, and like. Maybe even a comment if you feel like it. I release new episodes every single Monday on topics that I feel aren't talked about enough, and I'd love for this information to be shared with people who might find it helpful. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye.